If you're new here, my name is RuthAnn. My husband Lance was a service-connected, disabled U.S. Navy veteran. He was sick for 25 of the 27 years we were together, and for the last 12 years of his life, I was his full-time caregiver. This podcast is about caregiving in all its forms. My friend Jenna joins me to share her perspective as a stay-at-home mom who homeschooled her 5 children. At first, our lives seem very different, but we found we actually have a lot in common. So we share what connects us, hoping it helps you find your connections too. Well, today, Jenna is going to talk about some of the things that she learned as a parent. And this is an area we've talked about before, and we have found common ground that I don't know either one of us thought we would find.
When you first talked to me about maybe just having a couple of topics that were more centered around parenting and my experience as a caregiver to my kids, one of the things I wanted to talk about was just the idea that we will impact our kids' lives in the same way that you impacted Lance's life. And more specifically, I want to talk about how when we're raising our kids, we don't get to determine what things will impact them in which way, and neither do they. So I think we can all, if we look back, we can think about a time in our life, maybe it was during childhood, maybe it was during adolescence, where somebody's words or action had such a lasting and deep impact on us, good or bad, that it really kind of formed who we would become. It really informed our belief systems or how we view the world. And oftentimes those experiences that formed us so dramatically, those experiences aren't necessarily anything that anyone would have ever expected to have that impact. So it might have just been something that your parent or your teacher or a sibling or a friend, oftentimes an adult, said to you or did that you just remember forever, and it changes how you view the world. I know I can think of several just over the course of my life that I thought as an adult, why do I still think that? That person was 20 years old when they told me that. And maybe they didn't know what they were talking about. And yet I internalized that as the reality of life in the world. And I moved forward under the assumption that that was true. So I think when I realized that those things existed within me, and I wish I had been a little younger when I realized it, but it impacted the way I thought about my actions and words and how that would impact the people around me. Because not only did I not get to decide what things were going to stick in my brain, I don't get to decide what things I say will stick in my kids' brains. So being extra careful about your words and actions, being purposeful and communicating well with people around you, more specifically with children who are extremely impressionable and vulnerable, that's a huge weight and responsibility and something that needs to be taken very, very, very seriously.
Can you think of an instance of something that happened before you were aware of that, and it maybe changed your thought process on that as you moved forward?
So I probably won't share specific stories about my children, because anything that they have told me that was impactful to them was, obviously shared in confidence, and they were things that were very, very serious. And, we had to have conversations about, my intention when that happened, and I've had to apologize for the way that that impacted them. And I think that meant something to them, although it did not mean that they didn't still have to work through the lasting impact that that had had on their life. I mean, those things are very real, and changing your mindset and perspective on something that you've held as truth for so long, or a belief that you've held for so long, like that's no easy task. So I can't really share specific things about my kids, but something that really kind of brought that to mind and made me start looking through my own beliefs. When I was working as a personal trainer, I would oftentimes work with people that had maybe different injuries, or different physical limitations that they had attributed to sports injuries, maybe in college, but more often in high school. And I remember it became kind of common for people to share with me that they had been told something by a high school coach or athletic trainer that was so wildly untrue and maybe even damaging, that they had held on to. And these were people in their 30s, 40s, 50s. And they're telling me, well, I know that I should always whatever, or I should never whatever. And I would say, where did you hear that or learn that? Oh, it was my track coach in high school, taught me to never do this or to always do it this way. And so these people have been believing these things for decades, that things that really impacted their health and physical well-being, and never questioned it, because at the time that was an authority figure, it was an adult, it was somebody who knew more than them, and they internalized those ideas and beliefs in a way that ended up causing damage to their physical body over time. So I think that seeing that with some regularity made me kind of look at my own personal beliefs, and why do I do the things I do, and where did this come from? And then when I started really looking into that, it became clear to me that perhaps I was doing that to my children, that maybe in my youth, because I had my oldest when I was 20 years old, and I'm pretty sure I thought I knew way more things when I was in my 20s than maybe I actually did. But, I'm raising these kids and saying, yeah, this is how the world is. And maybe some of those weren't exactly right. And so I've tried to give them space as adults to ask me, is that really correct? Did you really mean that? Was that really true? Oh, no, I was 26. I didn't know what I was talking about.
Well, and I can't relate to that with children because I never had children, but would this be along the same lines of not just telling somebody something, but the way that you react to them too? If you always respond in anger to them, or if you're putting them down, or if you're criticizing them, and those are the feelings that they're always left with, and it changes how they feel about themselves. That's something that I would think would have a huge impact too. And that's something that I can relate to as a caregiver to Lance all those years that I cared for him. Because I can think of some instances of things that happen with Lance, and I think I may have shared this in another episode. Um, Lance had short-term memory loss, and the last few years of his life, it was so bad that he couldn't remember anything that happened a few minutes ago. But he was still always left with a feeling. And so if he had a day full of good things that had happened, at the end of the day, he felt good. And if he'd had a day where there was a whole bunch of negativity, he'd been, maybe a caregiver, or even I had been in a bad mood or something, when we get to the end of the day, he wouldn't be so happy. And I remember one time, he was on hospice, and we'd had it had been so stressful. I wasn't getting any sleep at all. And I used to get really bad migraines from the weather systems that would come through. And I woke up really early in the morning and I had such a terrible migraine. I wasn't sure how I was going to get out of bed. And suddenly he woke up and he needed the bathroom and he needed to get across the house right away. And so I jumped out of bed, not sure if I was actually going to be able to get him to the bathroom, but I got him over there and I went and sat on the couch and waited for him. And when it was time to get him back into bed, he snapped at me for something and I snapped back at him. And I instantly thought, this is the feeling that he is going to be left with for the rest of the day. I don't want this to be what, even if he doesn't remember exactly what happened, I don't want him to go back to sleep and wake up feeling awful because this is the feeling that I've left him with. And so I just stopped and I said, I am so sorry. I said, I don't feel well. I have a really bad headache, but that's not an excuse. I know that you can't move on your own. You can't get there on your own. And I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to snap at you. And he said, oh my gosh, that guy was just so amazing. He said, you know, I wouldn't want to be here with anyone but you.
I think that tells you everything you need to know about um, something that was so important to me. And I didn't get it right every single time, but I tried really hard. And that is to just be honest, and apologize when you've messed it up. Just be honest and don't make excuses. Um, I think it's fair to say, here's why I lashed out. Here's why I did this. Here's why, and then just say I was wrong. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. I should have maintained my self-control. I didn't though. And I'm sorry. And it impacted you and my whatever, my pain splashed out onto, whoever around me. And I think just being honest, one of the things that I I learned better as I got into um, my years as a parent. I learned more and more the value and the importance of offering a genuine apology and just saying I was wrong. Like that's all, and it didn't have to be something where I, had a meltdown and tried to make a dramatic scene about why I did what I did and say things like I'm such a bad mom, I'm not a good mom, I'm I don't know. There's a place where you can kind of manipulate the situation to maybe make the other person feel bad for feeling bad, which I think is terrible and toxic. But I think there is a place to genuinely just say, I lost my temper and that is not okay. And I'm the adult here, or for you, I'm the caregiver. I lost my temper. I lost my cool. I lashed out. That is not okay. I am sorry. The end.
Yep.
And it had obviously had such a big impact on Lance. I hope, I don't know, we'll see when the therapy bills start rolling in for my kids, but no, I really think that went a long way for just maybe correcting some of those things that might have had a much bigger impact on them than they would have if I just said, I'm sorry.
Communication is so important. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't learn when they're young. And also being able to say that you're wrong, admitting that is really hard, but we grow through things like that. None of us are perfect. If you can admit it and then talk through it, you can move forward and then nobody is carrying that burden.
Exactly. And I think just for raising children, right? When their brains are developing, they need to know that adults mess up and we're still working through it and getting it right. And so I think being transparent and honest and just saying, like, hey, I'm on this same journey with you. Like, I don't have it all figured out either. I'm still the boss, I'm still the mom. I still have to be the, kind of the one in charge. I'm the one that's responsible if something goes wrong. So I get to make the rules, right? But to do that with some humility and say, I'm also working through this. And when my kids, I want to say my third was a baby. My third child was a baby. I was in kind of a mom support group, and there was an older mom that she had grandkids, and she would kind of lead this group and kind of give us encouragement and, advice and whatnot, and let us kind of vent and talk about things. And one of the coolest things that she said, and again, right, you don't get to choose what's going to hit you and when, but this stuck with me so much, and it really impacted um, how I interacted with my kids. She said, just remember that if not for God's grace, your children would be your parents. And kind of giving the perspective, like, think about how would you want to be treated, right? Like, you didn't get to choose. You didn't get to choose. They didn't get to choose you as their parent. Who do you want them to be? How do you want them to learn and grow? That should be your motivation. Like, they could be the ones making the calls and in charge of you. So, how would you want that to look? So, try and model that behavior. And that was so impactful for me. And so, I think that's applicable to your situation, right? Those roles could be reversed. It could be Lance taking care of you. How would you want that to go? And so, it generated this humility and a really strong sense of the gravity of what I was doing. Like, this is so important and such a huge responsibility. It just really made me feel that weight in a way that I had never thought of, and kind of directed my um, thoughts and opinions on parenting moving forward.
Well, I think that's really great advice for parents, especially, but really for any of us. The things that we do, the things that we say impact the people around us. So I hope that this has been another helpful conversation. Thanks for joining me, Jenna, and I'll see you next time.
Bye.